Some songs don't just top the charts, they take over everything. The radio, the television, the shopping mall, the school dance, the car ride home. They become so embedded in daily life that people stop hearing them as songs and start hearing them as background to their own memories. The 1980s produced more of those songs than almost any other decade in history, and today we're counting down the 8 most played songs of that era. These aren't just hits. These are the songs that defined what it felt like to be alive in that particular moment in time. Every Breath You Take. On the surface, Every Breath You Take sounds like one of the most romantic songs ever written. The melody is gentle, the tempo is steady, and Sting's vocal delivery is warm and measured in a way that feels almost reassuring. And that's exactly the trick, because the song is not romantic at all. Sting has said repeatedly that it's a song about obsession, control, and surveillance. A portrait of a possessive, potentially dangerous narrator who watches every move his subject makes. The fact that it became one of the most played wedding songs of the decade says everything about how completely a great melody can override lyrical content. Released in 1983, it spent 8 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became the best-selling single of the year in the United States. The production was deliberately sparse, just enough to let the tension breathe without releasing it. Andy Summers' guitar riff, which anchors the entire track, was reportedly written in about 10 minutes, which is either humbling or infuriating, depending on how long you've been trying to write a song. The Police were already one of the biggest bands in the world when this came out, and it still managed to be the biggest thing they ever did. Sometimes a song arrives that is simply too perfectly constructed to be ignored, and this was that song. Don't You. Simple Minds almost didn't record this song. The track was written specifically for the Breakfast Club soundtrack by Keith Forsey and Steve Schiff, and it was offered to several artists before landing with Simple Minds, who initially turned it down. The band felt it wasn't representative of their sound, which was fair because it wasn't. Simple Minds were a serious, atmospheric post-punk band who had spent years building a very specific artistic identity. And Don't You Forget About Me was a straightforward pop song written by people outside the band for a teen movie. But their label pushed, John Hughes needed the track, and Simple Minds eventually recorded it almost reluctantly. It reached #1 in the United States and became so embedded in the cultural fabric of the decade that it's now essentially inseparable from the film itself. The irony is complete, that the song the band didn't want to make became the defining moment of their entire career. Every subsequent Simple Minds record was measured against it, which created a frustration the band carried for years. But here's what makes it genuinely great beyond the context. The opening keyboard line, Jim Kerr's vocal delivery in the chorus, and a production that somehow feels both enormous and intimate at the same time. The reluctant song turned out to be the perfect song, and no amount of artistic ambivalence could change that. Jump. Van Halen were one of the greatest rock bands on the planet, built entirely around Eddie Van Halen's guitar virtuosity, and their biggest hit was a keyboard song. The irony of that has never fully faded. Eddie had written the synthesizer riff for Jump years before it was recorded, but the rest of the band resisted, particularly David Lee Roth, who felt keyboards were a betrayal of what Van Halen was supposed to be. Eddie held on to it anyway. The band eventually came around, and Jump was released in 1984, spending 5 weeks at #1 and becoming the only Van Halen single to ever reach the top of the Billboard Hot 100. The production is enormous in a way that feels almost physical. That synth opening arrives like an announcement rather than an introduction, and Roth's vocal performance, swaggering and loose and completely self-assured, gave it an energy that matched the sound perfectly. What makes Jump fascinating beyond the chart performance is what it revealed about the tension inside the band. There's something almost poetic about the fact that the song Roth fought hardest against became the one that defined them permanently. He spent years performing a keyboard riff he never wanted to exist, in front of crowds who loved it more than anything else the band had ever done. Roth would leave Van Halen the following year, and in retrospect, the fight over this song feels like one of the early fractures in a relationship that was already under enormous strain. The biggest song they ever made together was also, in some ways, a sign that the thing that made them great was starting to come apart: Billie Jean. Billie Jean almost didn't make it onto Thriller. Quincy Jones, who produced the album, reportedly felt the song was too repetitive and pushed for it to be cut. Michael Jackson refused, insisted the song stayed, and turned out to be spectacularly right. Released in 1983, Billie Jean spent 7 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of the best-selling singles in history. The bass line alone is one of the most recognizable openings in all of recorded music. 4 notes that tell you exactly what you're about to hear before anything else arrives. But what makes Billie Jean extraordinary beyond the production is the performance. Jackson's vocal delivery is tense, defensive, almost paranoid, perfectly matching a lyric about a woman claiming he fathered her child. The emotion isn't performed, it feels lived in, which gave the song a weight that pure pop craftsmanship alone couldn't manufacture. The Motown 25 television performance, where Jackson debuted the moonwalk while performing Billie Jean, is one of the most watched moments in television history. But the song didn't need the moonwalk to be great. It was already complete before a single step was taken. Quincy Jones later acknowledged that cutting it would have been a catastrophic mistake, which is a significant admission from one of the greatest producers who ever lived. Sweet Child O' Mine. Slash came up with the guitar riff almost as a joke. He was warming up, running through what he described as a circus melody, something he was playing around with rather than presenting seriously. Izzy Stradlin heard it, Axl Rose heard it, and the band built a song around it that none of them initially expected to be anything significant. Sweet Child O' Mine was released in 1988 and reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming Guns N' Roses' only chart topper and one of the most recognized guitar riffs in the history of rock music. The song worked because it was genuinely different from everything else on Appetite for Destruction, softer, more vulnerable. Built around a love letter Axl had written about his then-girlfriend Erin Everly. In the middle of an album full of aggression and chaos, a moment of genuine tenderness hit harder than anyone expected. The production by Mike Klink gave it a clarity that let every instrument breathe, which meant that the riff had room to become iconic rather than getting buried in noise. What's remarkable is that the band's instinct was to downplay it, to treat it as the lightweight track on a heavy record. Instead, it became the song that introduced them to an audience that the harder material alone might never have reached. And it pulled millions of people into a back catalog that then proceeded to absolutely destroy them, like a prayer. Madonna had already been one of the biggest pop stars on the planet for 5 years when Like a Prayer arrived in 1989, and it still managed to feel like a completely new statement. The song opens with a gospel choir, builds through a verse that sounds almost confessional, and then explodes into a chorus that is simultaneously a religious experience and a pop hook so efficient it borders on unfair. It reached #1 in every major market and became one of the best-selling singles of the decade. But the song didn't arrive quietly. The music video, featuring burning crosses, stigmata, and a black saint, generated immediate controversy and caused Pepsi to pull a multi-million-dollar advertising deal with Madonna within days of the campaign launching. Rather than damage the song, the controversy sent it stratospheric. What's easy to forget now is how genuinely ambitious the songwriting was. Co-written with Patrick Leonard, it dealt with faith, sexuality, race, and personal history in a way that pop music almost never attempted. The two had been working together since the mid-1980s, but this was the collaboration that pushed furthest beyond the boundaries of what either of them had done before. And you can hear that ambition in every layer of the recording. The production moved between intimacy and enormity in a way that felt completely controlled like every dynamic shift had been planned down to the second. The gospel choir wasn't decoration, it was structural, carrying emotional weight that the instrumentation alone couldn't have delivered. Madonna had made bigger hits before in terms of pure chart performance, but like a prayer was the moment she stopped being a pop star and started being something harder to categorize. Take on Me.
I'll be coming for your love, okay. Take on me.
There are second chances, and then there is the second chance that Take on Me got in 1985. The song had already been released once in 1984, flopped completely, and was quietly shelved. Most bands would have walked away. a-ha didn't. They went back into the studio, rebuilt the production from the ground up, and then attached it to a music video that nobody had ever seen anything like before. A hand-drawn pencil sketch animation that pulled a real girl into a comic book world. The video won 8 MTV Video Music Awards and completely changed what people expected from a music video. But here's what gets lost in all the visual conversation. The song itself is extraordinary. That opening synth riff is one of the most instantly recognizable sounds of the entire decade. And Morten Harkett's vocal performance, hitting notes that seemed genuinely impossible in a live setting, gave it an emotional weight that the visuals alone couldn't have carried. a-ha were 3 young Norwegians who had moved to London with almost nothing and a demo tape full of ambition, and Take on Me was their best everything moment. It paid off in a way that reshaped pop music and left every subsequent a-ha release living permanently in its shadow. Faith George Michael spent the first half of the 1980s being one half of Wham, one of the most successful pop acts on the planet. Then he released Faith in 1987 and spent the second half of the decade being something else entirely, a solo artist so dominant that the previous chapter of his career almost seemed like a warm-up. The album Faith produced 4 #1 singles in the United States, which had never been done before from a debut solo album. The title track itself, with its rockabilly guitar opening lifted almost directly from a Hammond organ riff, was a statement of intent that was not Wham. This was not the boy from the pop duo. This was something harder and more deliberate. The song reached #1 in the United States and the UK and spent what felt like the entire year on the radio. What made Faith work as a lead single was the contrast it created, the acoustic guitar giving it an almost retro feel, the production keeping it lean and direct, and Michael's vocal performance carrying a confidence that didn't need to announce itself. He was 24 years old and sounded like someone who had already figured out exactly what he wanted to say and precisely how to say it. Faith didn't just launch a solo career, it reset the entire conversation about who George Michael was. And the answer turned out to be considerably more interesting than anyone had expected. Those are 8 songs that didn't just top the charts, they became part of the furniture of an entire decade. People who lived through the 1980s don't just remember these songs, they remember exactly where they were when they heard them for the first time. And that kind of connection doesn't come from marketing. It comes from songs that were genuinely, undeniably right for their moment. Let us know in the comments which one hits hardest for you, and we'll see you in the next one.